What does it take to stand firm when everything around you is designed to break you? What does it take to keep believing when your environment, your culture, your leaders, and even the laws of the land are pressuring you to compromise? What does it take to hold on to God? Not just when life is easy, but when obedience could cost you your future or even your life. Today, we're not talking about shallow faith. We are not talking about faith that only works when things go well. We are talking about unshakable faith. We are talking about Daniel. Daniel was not born into comfort. He was not raised in a palace. He did not grow up expecting greatness. Yet history remembers his name thousands of years later, not because he was powerful, but because he was faithful. Daniel's story is not just a Bible story. It is a mirror. It reflects the struggle of anyone trying to live for God in a world that does not honor him. And before the lions, before the dreams, before the miracles, Daniel's faith was already being tested. Hey family, welcome back to Faith Unshakable. Here we share Bible stories that will encourage and strengthen you on your walk with faith. So if you love God and want to root it in faith, do well to subscribe, watch to the end, like and share. Now back to Daniel's story. Daniel's story begins with loss. Jerusalem had fallen. The temple had been looted. The people of Judah were defeated. Babylon, the most powerful empire on earth, had invaded God's people. And among the captives taken from Jerusalem were young men, strong, intelligent, promising. Daniel was one of them. He was taken from his home, taken from his culture, taken from his language, taken from everything familiar. Imagine that moment. One day, you are living your normal life, worshiping God, surrounded by your people. The next day, you are marched into a foreign land, ruled by a pagan king, surrounded by idols and false gods. Daniel did not choose Babylon. Babylon was forced on him. And here's something important. Faith is often tested not when we choose the situation, but when the situation chooses us. Babylon had a plan, and that was to change his identity. King Nebuchadnezzar had a strategy. He didn't just want servants. He wanted loyalty, so he ordered that the brightest young captives be trained in Babylonian culture, language, and wisdom. But the plan went deeper than education. Daniel's name was changed. Daniel means, God is my judge. Babylon renamed him Belteshazzar, meaning Bel's prince. Bel being a false god. This wasn't random. It was an attempt to erase his identity. Change the name, change the culture, change the thinking, change the worship, and slowly change the faith. Babylon was saying, forget where you came from, forget who you serve. You belong to us now, but here's the truth. You can change a man's location without changing his conviction. Daniel may have been in Babylon, but Babylon was not in Daniel. The first test was at the table of the king, before lions, before fire, before dreams and visions. Daniel faced his first test at the dinner table. The king assigned food and wine from his own table, food offered to idols and prepared in ways forbidden by God's law. Now to Babylon, this looked like an honor. To Daniel, it was a compromise. No one would have blamed him for eating it. He was far from home. He was under authority. Everyone else was doing it, but Daniel understood something critical. Small compromises lead to big collapses. The Bible says something powerful, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself. Daniel chapter 1 verse 8. That word resolved means he made a decision before the pressure came. Faith is not built in the moment of testing. Faith is built in the moments of decision before the test arrives. Daniel didn't wait to see how things turned out. He didn't negotiate with sin. He didn't say, just this once. He resolved. Courage without arrogance. Daniel didn't rebel violently. He didn't insult authority. He didn't act prideful. He respectfully requested permission to eat vegetables and drink water instead. This is important. Strong faith does not need to be loud to be firm. Faith can be respectful and still unmovable. The official was afraid, because obedience to Daniel could cost him his life. But Daniel proposed a test. Test us for 10 days. 10 days of faith. 10 days of obedience. 10 days of trusting God without knowing the outcome. And after 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier, stronger, and wiser than everyone else. God honored their faith. God rewards faithful beginnings. The Bible tells us that God gave Daniel knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. and the ability to interpret dreams. Not because Daniel was gifted, but because Daniel was faithful. And here's a lesson we cannot miss. God often reveals greater purpose only after we prove faithfulness in small things. Daniel's story did not begin in the lion's den. It began with a decision, and that decision set the foundation for everything that followed. But the tests were only beginning. Because faith that survives temptation must also survive pressure, and that pressure was about to come. Not from food, but from fear. Daniel's faith had passed its first test, but now it was about to be tested on a national stage. Babylon was powerful, Nebuchadnezzar was feared, and one dream would shake the entire kingdom. A dream no one could explain. One night, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream so disturbing that he woke up terrified. But this was no ordinary dream. He demanded that his wise men not only interpret it, but tell him what the dream was without him explaining it. Impossible. The astrologers, sorcerers, and magicians panicked, and the king responded with rage. He ordered that all the wise men of Babylon be executed. That included Daniel. Daniel, who had done nothing wrong, was now facing death. And this is where faith becomes real. Faith responds with prayer, not panic. Daniel didn't panic. He didn't run. He didn't complain. He asked for time. Then he went to his friends, and they prayed, not for escape, not for favor, but for mercy from God. That night, God revealed the dream and its interpretation to Daniel. And Daniel did something remarkable. He praised God before going to the king. True faith thanks God before the victory is visible. God gets the glory. When Daniel stood before the king, he made one thing clear. No wise man, enchanter, or magician can explain this, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Daniel could have taken credit, but faith that seeks attention is not faith. It's ego. God used Daniel to reveal the dream, interpret the future, and humble a king. And Daniel was promoted. From captive to commander. Daniel rose to power, but he never lost humility. Promotion did not corrupt his faith. Power did not silence his convictions. But success attracts enemies. And soon, those enemies would use the law to try to destroy him. Because when compromise fails, persecution follows. And that brings us to the moment Daniel is most famous for. The lion's den. Daniel was now an old man, but his faith had not aged. A new king ruled Babylon, Darius. Daniel was so faithful, so excellent, that the king planned to put him over the entire kingdom. And that made others jealous. They searched for fault in Daniel. They found none, so they attacked his faith. They convinced the king to sign a law forbidding prayer to any god except the king for 30 days. They knew Daniel prayed 3 times a day, and Daniel knew the law. But the Bible says, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home and prayed, just as he had done before. No hiding, no fear, no compromise. Unshakable faith does not adjust to pressure, it remains consistent. Daniel was seen breaking the law, and because of that, Daniel was arrested. The king was distressed, but the law could not be changed. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. A stone was sealed. Hope seemed buried. But God was already working. That night, God shut the mouths of the lions. Not one scratch. Not one wound. Daniel was protected. And in the morning, Daniel walked out alive. Daniel had unwavering faith. Unshakable faith. Faith did not save Daniel from the den. Faith sustained Daniel in the den. Daniel's faith outlived empires. Kings came and went, but Daniel stood firm. He showed us that faith is not about convenience. It is about conviction. Faith that does not bow. Faith that does not break. Faith that does not burn. Faith that does not shake. Faith that is deeply rooted. If this story inspired you, if Daniel's faith challenged you, if you believe God is calling you to stand firm in your own life, like this video to spread this message of faith. Subscribe for more powerful Bible stories and encouragement. Comment below, I choose faith over fear. And remember, you may be surrounded, you may be pressured, you may be tested, But if God is with you, no lion can destroy you.